Hello, Stu.
Glenn, I was thinking about this big lawsuit against the president, former president. First he had the $83 million from the E. Jean Carroll situation.
Which really was caused by him.
Well, this is an interesting point, right? Like, I think, a totally false accusation against him.
Yeah, totally false.
He said, this is false, this is crazy.
Yes.
He fought it. They went through this case. I think he got totally screwed, and they ruled against him for a few $1 million. Mm-hmm. And they said, basically, you can't go out and talk about this anymore. And he just did. Right? Like, he was like, I don't care what you say.
Yeah. And you know what? Mm-hmm. You have that right to do that if that's what if that's what you want. But
he knew what the price of that was. He knew the price would be high.
Correct.
And occasionally, even people have made the point that Donald Trump creates some of his own issues. Okay.
Yes. But he also has what I like to call FU money.
Yes, FU money, and he gets to do this, right?
Money,
exactly.
Like, $85 million, it's worth it. She sucks.
And sometimes people have pointed out that when he makes some of his own problems, he will still say he's the victim of persecution. He will kind of go to that. Say that's kind of the way he goes, and some have noticed this over time. But might I address this lawsuit that came down in this ruling in New York? $355
million. Yep. It'll cost him over $400 million when it's all said and done. By the way, ruling yesterday, the same Supreme Court justice said that he hasn't provided a good reason as to why he should delay the judgment from last week. So he said, "You failed to explain, much less justify, any basis for a stay. I'm confident that the appellate division will protect your appellate rights." So he's got to cough this up. Now, they're talking about this is so much money that he's going to have to put up probably real estate and sell some real estate to be able to pay for this, because you have to put that money into a bond. And then you have a bondholder holding it for you, and you have to pay them an additional fee.
Right, and then hopefully you win the appeal and eventually don't have to pay it. But I mean,
it'll still cost you about $50 million.
It's still going to suck.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But talking about whether he's the victim of political persecution, I believe this case it's actually provable.
Oh,
it is. It's not. But it's not just. Oh yeah. It's not just. Oh yeah. Well, of course. I mean. Because I think on his face, that's how I react to this, right? He's running for president of the United States. They're trying to put him out of business, throw him in prison, take him off the ballots. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious just on its surface that's how I translate it.
The only thing he hasn't been hit with is, have some uranium pie.
Right.
You know what
right.
I mean? The only thing is he's not been hit with an umbrella or with a little pin in the end of it, like the CIA used to. That's the only thing that hasn't happened. That's it.
And so I think on its surface, it's easy to just look at this, but the details of this one in particular are so egregious. First of all, it's not like this number that they came up with. They just came up with an algorithm that they built to come up with this number. And it's like, well, we think if he didn't defraud these banks, then the banks would have made more money. Now, of course, the banks could have gone to him and just requested a higher interest rate, which they didn't do. But
because they found him a good risk, because they'd done business with him before.
And they all knew he had lots of money, and they all knew he had a successful business, and they all knew he would pay back the loans. They all knew this would occur. So they went down this road. Now, of course, their case in New York is, hey, you defrauded all these banks. You screwed all these banks out of money. So you have to pay $350 million to us.
Right.
The state of New York.
Because the banks
get none of it.
The banks didn't file this. There was no complaint. None.
Even if you'd think there was no complaint, if you're saying they were defrauded, you'd think they would get the money. But no. It goes directly to the state of New York, which is just another comical layer to this. But listen to this breakdown of this particular rule, this law, and how it's been used in the past. Because as you point out, there's no victims here. No one is coming. No bank is being, hey, by the way, he lied about this, and this didn't work out for us.
In fact, the banks testified
On his behalf.
On his behalf,
Yes.
saying there's no victim. We knew this. We take that into account with everybody we loan. That's why we have a whole division that goes out and does the estimates for us. We know we're not stupid.
Right.
Right.
So this law has been around for 70 years, okay? And there's multiple facets of this. There's the big fine, which is kind of the headline, but also the fact that they might take his business away. They're saying he can't run his business. They're saying his kids can't run the business anymore. They're trying to turn this essentially into a death penalty for this company.
They are.
So it is the only big business that was threatened with a shutdown without showing obvious victims or major losses in 70 years. The only one, okay? The AP went through 150 cases since New York's repeated fraud statute was passed in 1956, and it showed that nearly every previous time a company was taken away, victims and losses were key factors. You'd think, right? Customers lose money because they bought defective products or never received services ordered, leaving them cheated and angry. What's more, businesses were taken over almost always as a last resort to stop a fraud in progress to protect potential victims. So let's look back at this now, because there is one case where they try to take a company, which is what they're threatening here with the Trump Corporation.
Do we have that? Hang on. Do we have that clip of the AG saying that they're going to take it? Here it is. Listen.
4 days after a judge ordered Donald Trump to pay $355 million for a decade of fraud, New York Attorney General Letitia James says she's prepared to do everything she can to make sure the former president pays his fine, including, she told us, seizing the buildings that bear his name.
If he does not have funds to pay off the judgment, then we will seek, judgment enforcement mechanisms in court, and we will ask the judge to seize his assets.
I love the drama. She's so dramatic. It's hilarious.
I know. Think of that, though. You're doing business in New York.
Oh, I'd get out of there.
Get out of there.
You got to get out of there.
Get out of there.
I mean, again,
and honestly, if you live in New York, honestly, you have a house in New York, you're living in New York, you're just like, yeah, well, we don't want to give up on New York. Get the hell out of New York. And I know a lot of people that say, well, I can't because my whole family is here. Get out of New York. If they're doing this kind of stuff to him, there is no rule of law in New York. Okay?
It's always been liberal, right?
Right.
But
This is different.
This is totally different. It's like the difference between the New York Times. We were talking about this the other day, where like the New York Times was always liberal, but then there was like, hey, this is an op-ed written by a U.S. senator, and the op-ed guy gets fired for just letting it be printed, right? Like the crazy people on the left, the AOCs have taken over places in the media and places like this in New York. This is what it is now. So there's been one case, one in the entire 70 years where they did this, where they shut down a company that had no obvious victims. The case was 1972, and it was a company, relatively small company, that was writing term papers for college students. Okay, so like I don't want to write my paper.
I want to break out, and God bless America.
Capitalism is pretty impressive, but apparently this one didn't go over that well.
Right, sure.
And what they said was there's no obvious victims here because the people bought the term papers. They didn't want to write them. They got the term papers, but they said this was they were defrauding the education system,
which they were.
This is the one time.
Yeah.
And it's a small, tiny company. Let me give you the other times they've done this. Tell me if any of these sound like, hey, I got a good interest rate on a loan I paid back. Number one, a breast cancer nonprofit was shut down a dozen years ago for using nearly all its $9 million in donations to pay for directors' salaries, perks, and other expenses instead of funding free mammograms. Okay.
Yeah,
so they told everyone, donate money for free mammograms, and they just took all the money for themselves. Okay. That's number one. Number two, a private equity firm faking big investment success was closed down after stealing millions of dollars from thousands of investors. Okay.
Yeah,
like you can
clear.
see.
Yeah,
that's a different.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay.
But on both of those so far, you have hundreds of thousands of people, I'm sure they gave, they're all victims. They gave their money
And they didn't get the thing they wanted.
They didn't get the thing that they were promised. So you have all of these people going to the AG going, hey, there's a real problem here. This has got to stop.
Yep.
Got it.
Not here.
Not here.
Another one. Mental health facility shuttered for looting $4 million from public funds while neglecting patients.
Hey, kind of a big
Pretty
one.
clear.
Yeah.
An auto lender that allegedly charged hidden, usurious interest rates got to stay in business last year if it paid a fine and didn't commit fraud in the future. So here's one they didn't shut down. They actually let them go on. They're going after Trump for all of this. But in this one, they're like, sure, they're hidden fees.
Right.
They're not telling you about them.
Right.
Okay. A judge refused to request to shut down a river rafting company in 2011 after a customer drowned, and the attorney general showed it was repeatedly using unlicensed guides or none at all. Instead, he ordered only a $50,000 bond and cleanup, and for him to clean up his act. The company is still being run today under a different name by the same family.
Okay, so what we have
someone died.
We have thousands of victims, and in this case, somebody who's dead.
It's dead.
Dead. And
they're like, yeah, you guys can stay open $50,000 bond. And then this is my favorite one. A judge in 2001 declined to appoint a receiver to take over a porn site despite millions of dollars of illegal credit card charges to hundreds of customers who thought they were getting a free tour. Now, look here. You want to get the free, you want to know what you're subscribing to, Glenn, before you just pull the trigger on that.
Right.
So you put your credit card information into a porn site. I think some of these victims need some life changes to be made here. But they put their credit card into a porn site expecting a free tour, and they instead just get charged and charged and charged and charged and charged. In fact, once the owners of the site were caught, they attempted to move their money overseas to avoid any penalty. Still, the judge said appointing a receiver was an extraordinary remedy that should be used sparingly, and that a preliminary injunction was good enough. Only after all that happened did they find out the people running the porn site were the Gambino crime family. I kid you not. The Gambino crime family.
And they didn't go into receivership.
No. So there you go.
There you go.
Think about that. I mean, it's so obvious what they're doing. Letitia James talked about it when she ran. Her goal was to take this one individual out. And the voters of New York said, good, go do it. And now she's doing it.
Okay, if you have business in New York, if you are in New York, I'm just telling you, you got to do what you got to do. But there's no way I would keep my business in New York. There is no rule of law now. You know it on the streets, but there is no rule of law. If they can get away with this, they can do anything to you.